So maybe what we can do now is introduce some of the graduate students who are on the call. So I'm just going to go through and let them introduce themselves. So maybe I'll start with Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris, and I'm in a lab in the University of Michigan that conducts computational fluid dynamics modeling for cardiovascular applications. So we basically look to study either surgical planning or just disease research. For example, my two diseases that I study are pulmonary and renal vascular hypertension. I'm a fourth year in the lab, and I think I want to echo what Eileen said about making sure that you talk to the grad students that you're going to be working with, because those are your best resource, one of your best resources throughout this whole experience of selecting a lab. Thank you.
Excellent. So then we also have Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Alyssa Welly. I'm my fifth year PhD student now in biomedical engineering in Professor Cindy Chestik's lab, which is in the bioelectric neural engineering concentration. And yeah, I'm excited to talk more about questions for deciding on grad school and grad school labs. There's a lot of ways to go about this, but I think most important is kind of the things that have already been mentioned. Yeah, happy to be here.
Perfect. So then Elizabeth.
Hi guys, my name is Elizabeth. I am a third year PhD student in Tim Bruns's lab, which is the Peripheral Neural Engineering and Neurodynamics Laboratory. I did my undergrad at Pitt in bioengineering. My research focuses on neuromodulation techniques for female sexual dysfunction. So I'm very lucky I get to do a mix of preclinical and clinical research. What else? Oh, so what made me come to U of M? I would say the community. I know like that's sort of been reiterated a lot. U of M is very fancy, you know, you see our accolades and our rankings and stuff, but really when I got here and I got like the vibe of the community, for how elite we are very like chill, I guess. I don't know. There's not a competitive sort of feel, you know, at like some institutions where, you know, you keep your research secret because you don't want someone to like take your idea. We're very collaborative and open, and I really, really like being a part of this department because of that reason.
Excellent. So Carolina.
Hi everyone, my name is Carolina. I just started my third year into the PhD program, and like my research involves systems biology, and specifically I use computational models and machine learning to optimize design of therapeutics to treat bacterial infections where antibiotic resistance is a big problem. And I did my undergrad at the University of Virginia, also studied BME, and then like the major reason why I chose to come here to UM is because I thought this place, you know, had a good kind of like diverse set of faculty that I could explore working with. I also got the sense that collaboration was a major part of the research that happens here, and I think that's really important. And also, U of M is like a very like like distinguished and reputable and well-known school with a lot of really good connections, and so that's another reason why I chose to come to this school. And I'm excited to answer your questions and talk to you guys.
Fabulous. And then Javiera.
Hey everyone, I'm Javiera Gilberto. I am from Chile and this is my first year, so I've only been here for a month. I'm gonna be working with David Northleden in his lab. And the thing that made me come here, yes, there are a lot of things, but one is the quality of the faculty and that you can do collaborative research with clinicians, and it's a very interdisciplinary environment. And I also, in this month, I have enjoyed a lot what the other people said about the community and how they have worked to make us feel part of this department, even though we are in pandemic and we cannot see each other in person. Yeah.
Excellent. So we have a good group of people here. Is there any questions that you guys would like to ask the students that we have about their experiences or applications or? So maybe I'll just start you guys off with a question here. So for you guys, what was your most exciting research experience that you've had since you've been here at Michigan? Does someone want to start us off? Chris.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been the highly collaborative environment. So I guess in my case, my professor is part of both BME as well as the Department of Surgery. And that has enabled me to become part of projects that, have real world implications. And I get to collaborate with the medical school faculty, and I really see the impact of my work firsthand.
Does anybody else want to? Yeah, Carolina.
So one really exciting aspect of my research was so the methods that I use can be applied broadly, not just like within like antibiotic resistance research, but can also be applied, for example, for cancer research. So I had the exciting opportunity on helping 2 other labs kind of like analyze their data in more detail using metabolic models. And those projects, like I specifically focus on bacterial metabolism, but it was exciting to see that I could apply the skills that I know to look at cancer cells and like metabolic changes between healthy and cancer cells. So I thought that was really exciting.
So I might jump in here. We're getting a good list of questions going. So I'll interrupt my question with the more important questions from the students here. So one of them is, what's been the most unexpected experience or part of your graduate education so far? I think everybody would be pandemic, but
Yeah, I think so. I can't
if anybody
speak for
expected
people.
that, raise your hand. That would be impressive.
I think it's been, at least for me, the pandemic. And I think it's been very surprising, just the quick response that has led. I know a decent amount of my peers, are back in their labs in some restricted capacity. So whether it's like lower capacity or, less time, at some point there was 3 shifts going. And I think University of Michigan did a good job at making sure that the researchers stayed on track while providing, a lot of safety measurements for them. At some point, they were basically vetting everyone that came through the doors, and we had very low numbers of cases in our researchers.
I think one of the most unexpected parts of the PhD has been for me is just the amount of collaboration that we have. I mean, that's been mentioned before in the last few minutes, but it really is truly like the opposite of what I thought a PhD would be like. I definitely assumed that it would be, really just like me doing my research, alone by myself, like making my thing, doing all my figures, and I felt like it was like historically advertised to me as something that was very independent, and it was kind of this big thing that you work towards and you achieve by yourself. And like, that's not how it is. Like, people work together all the time. All of my papers have, multiple senior authors on it. Like, it's not just that I'm working with a bunch of peers, but I'm literally working with multiple labs. I'm working with Dr. Bruns, like, really closely right now, and we worked together for 3 years. And, Elizabeth and I have done a million experiments together. And, we really, like, it truly is not a individual pursuit. It's a group effort. And so it's important for finding labs, I think it's, and I think that's a good thing, if that wasn't clear. I think it's a really good thing to be collaborative. It feels very much like a dynamic and exciting process of learning together with people. And not only do you make friends through that, but also you just like, you can just achieve more together. And one of the things I loved about Michigan was the fact that it was very collaborative. At the time that I joined here, it was really just Dr. Chestic and Dr. Bruns that were in the neural engineering concentration predominantly. We had a lot of affiliated faculty and, you know, spread across the med school, but the kind of the core people that I would get to interact with on a day-to-day basis would just be those two. And now we have doubled that in terms of core and even more affiliated faculty that work with us. And so part of the process of interviewing for Michigan was for me kind of figuring out the lay of the land of social dynamics and like who works together, how many collaborations are there, that kind of stuff, because it felt unique to Michigan that there was so much collaboration. And I'm not entirely sure if it is entirely unique, and I just didn't see that as much in other schools. But one of the things I found in Michigan is even though I was interviewing at a place that had in my concentration at the time just 2 professors, I felt like there was just so much collaboration between those two that I was kind of getting double than what I was bargaining for. It's like, oh, sweet, I get to have, you know, extra mentorship and extra peers and things like that. And that was something, and I recommend students to kind of, you know, ask the kind of questions for, oh, like what kind of collaborations are there? You know, how often do people in the lab work with other senior authors for their publications? You know, how close are you with your thesis committee? And, you know, how often do students perform experiments by themselves or in groups? And that's one of the, I think the most unexpected, pleasantly unexpected parts of my PhD is just the sheer amount of collaboration is awesome. I love it.
I want to add, I'd second both of those things. But something that was unexpected for me, not necessarily, I mean, I guess it's going to sound bad at first, but like I didn't expect the faculty and administrative staff to care as much about the students as they seem to. You know, all these people like have very busy lives, like their PIs doing their own research. In addition, they like found the time to come here, talk with us, and they do so much more outside of just the Zoom call, like for the students. They really care about us and our individual well-being. I remember at the start of the pandemic, people were like, oh my God, so like, what do we do? Like, is everyone okay? And someone, I suggested, I was like, at the time, Jen was the BME grad chair, and she was like, you know, what do you think would help the students? And I was like, oh, like maybe you could just email everyone individually and ask if they're okay. And then she did. She emailed every single student and was like, please respond. How are you doing? Do you have any concerns? And I just like, can't imagine that level of like, I didn't think that, you know, we would be that looked out for, but we are, and it's a really nice feeling.
So maybe I'll ask another question. So what factors did you look for in labs when you were looking, other than the research interest area? What were other factors that helped you guys pick a lab or what you were looking for?
I can just continue talking, I guess. So I looked at the community, not necessarily like related to collaboration, but just did I get along with some of the people I interacted with? Like, did they seem like people I could have casual talks with or things in common with? You know, you're signing up to do, you know, 2 to 5 years of research in one area. And it's like, okay, am I going to have a life outside of this? How am I going to make friends? How am I going to meet people? Especially like with the pandemic, that's probably a bigger concern. Like, you know, I basically looked for things that made me think I would have work-life balance.
So I also saw there's people asking similar questions, and so like a little bit introduction. I'm also like undergraduate, but and applying for PhD student programs this year. So I think a lot of us have similar concern about like what kind of lab we should be, you know, reaching out to, since we have a wide range of interests. Maybe I'm interested in cell labs, but I'm also interested in imaging labs. I'm just wondering if the graduate student or the faculty can get advice on that. Like, should I be limit myself into certain labs, or I should be open to opportunities, things like that?
maybe I can jump in from a faculty perspective just quickly. And that's, I mean, you've got to make your decision, right? So, you know, my best advice to you is to keep all of your doors open until you've made a decision on what you want to do. In the end, you might end up with a project that has the mix of all of these interests together. But I would suggest to you to you know, pursue all of the potential areas that you'd be interested in. And the thing that I would do as a recommendation was, when you're talking with an individual faculty member, just be very focused. So you don't want to sort of give the impression that you're looking for everything under the sun, but just, you can say, I have these interests, and then jump quickly into what their interests are, because you're then in that point talking to one person, and that's like one of your doors that you're looking at maybe stepping through. So then just try to keep it a little bit focused, and then it won't give any negative impression on you that you're too broad interest and maybe not interested in what they're talking about. It'll show that you've done some research into what they do and why you're talking to them. Does anybody from a student perspective want to share on that? Sorry, I don't mean to answer questions.
No, you're perfectly fine. I think, yeah, you definitely shouldn't feel like you need to limit yourself. I think I could say for everyone that we all apply to a decent amount of schools. And, you know, it's a very long and sometimes painful process. But you definitely want to make sure, you know, that you're always looking out for yourself and those faculty that you think you would be interested in most. I definitely recommend you reaching out to them before you even apply to the program. It's always a good idea to go through lab websites, but not only the websites, you can also go through the CVs of those professors, because they tend to list every single project that they've been involved in, and that's always, you know, good information to have.
Does anybody else want to share from a student perspective? Sorry, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, so I mean, I think it's normal to have a wide range of interests, and I think it's also normal to have a PhD that kind of shifts and forms as you go through it. So you might start out on some project and kind of shift and change into another project. So that's a good question to ask, you know, when you're talking to professors and then graduate students, definitely, to see, you know, kind of what the lab like movement is in terms of their focus and shift. I mean, you know, oftentimes professors start a lab, and then due to funding, due to collaborations, due to a lot of other factors, their own lab interests will shift and change. And I think that depends on the professor. Like, some professors might stay more set on their original goal for what their lab's focus is, and that could be due to funding availability and things like that, or it could just be that they're really interested in this one question and they want to pursue that one thing. Other labs have a little bit more of a meandering path, and they'll take up other projects and collaborations that are maybe a little outside the typical bandwidth for a lab. So it's good to have a broad range and to be flexible, but it's also interesting, I think, to talk to professors and just ask them about how their own research path has shifted, because that can be an indicator of how, you know, potentially if you are a student in their lab, you might be able to start out with something, and then like maybe your thesis can shift and change and incorporate some other ideas into the questions that you're asking and the projects that you're working on. I know that I started out, I'm in the neural electrode field, fabrication fields. I do a lot of fabrication, and my original focus was recording from the brain, which was kind of the traditional focus for our lab. But due to the fact that we have a great collaboration with Dr. Bruns and Dr. Seymour, who is now at in Texas, we were able to, like, you know, there's a grant that showed up, and so now I'm working on a project that applies it to peripheral nerves. And so, you know, like, there's just this kind of like shift. Even though our lab is originally focused on brain-machine interfaces, now I'm learning all about nerve physiology and how to do, you know, how to access the spinal cord through other, so there's lots of other, like, there's ways in which a thesis will shift and change. And so it's part of it being flexible as a student, and also part of it that, like, I think my professor is particularly interested in collaborations, which means that sometimes our lab path will shift and change a little bit. And some labs do that more or less. And so that's a good question to ask people when you're talking to them about their research.
Can I just quickly add to the original question I asked? Like for the CV or the resume, or maybe even the personal statement, which I'm really trying to get it down with, is it possible to talk about my potential interest, or should I be focusing on like a specific area? Maybe anyone from the faculty or the graduate student can answer or provide some advice on that.
I think it's good to show interest in specific people when you're applying to schools, like, and to explain why, like, your past research experience and your interests align well with the research of the specific faculty that you're listing. I think that is good for just catching their attention. So yeah, that's my first thought on that question.
In terms of the application, if you're writing personal statement or presenting your CV, I mean, that's really more about what you've done and kind of where, and I guess in your personal statement, you get into where you want to go with it. But you're going to really be, everything that puts into rock solid evidence why you are able to do the things that you're saying you want to do is going to be your experiences. So you're going to have to kind of draw from that. And that's really the kind of key piece when you're walking through your personal statement. As you get into where you're going and why you think, Michigan's a great place for you to achieve your longer term goals, you can then start getting into, these different areas of interest. But as Alyssa said, the more you can focus and show that you have interest in some specific faculty members, that's the more that faculty member might say, oh yeah, okay, this guy's interested in what I'm doing. That's great. Let me look more closely at his application. So it's a way of kind of drawing their interest. If you have just a generic statement that you give, that might be great, but an individual faculty member might not draw in on that. So it's good to have these specific things. And you might find that for certain schools that you apply to, there's faculty that you're interested in working with, and they all kind of cluster in one area. And if you apply to a different school, it's maybe in another area. So you can kind of tweak that latter portion of your letter to address those different members of faculty.
Thank you.
And I'll chip in there too. You don't want to focus on one professor at any one place, because any given lab adds students kind of on a rolling basis. It depends on size, it depends on grants, things shift. So it's always good to have multiple options of interest at a given school, both because maybe one great lab just doesn't have an opening, or maybe you realize, oh, this is cool, but wow, I really clicked with somebody else and I didn't even think about it. So keep your options a little bit, and especially when you have your application, express interest in multiple groups.
So there's one question on here that I want to field to these guys, because I think that you all would be very good to answer this. So the question is basically, what do you wish you had done differently when you were applying or starting out as a graduate student?
Dangerous game to venture into the regret category. I personally wish that I had taken a gap year between undergraduate and grad school, and like either worked or just like done non-scientific of like experience. I think sometimes doing the K through PhD track is when you're in school for a long time, sometimes it feels like you're in school for a long time. I'm also saying this as a fifth year, so I see the end in sight, but also I'm not quite there yet. So I think people who are maybe younger are not experiencing that as much. But I do think that there is something to be said about the fact that when you start a PhD, you're kind of locked in for 5 years. Like you can take internships, you can, you have to travel for conferences. Like that's always a huge perk, is getting to travel for conferences. Doing internships is totally normal. Maybe going to work for a collaborator's lab for a summer, for a month or something like that, also totally normal. But there is something about a PhD that feels particularly solid. Like you're in it, you gotta do 5 years of it. For a master's, obviously this is different because you have a clear timeline of when you end. But I think there's a part of me that thinks that I would have enjoyed having some time to think and like reaffirm the fact that I want to do a PhD before I start. But then again, also when you finish undergrad, it totally makes sense it totally made sense for me to just apply my senior year. You interview your senior spring, and then you attend, you know, the next fall, or for me, the summer beforehand. So, you know, there's also like, it makes sense to have that continuity in time, and to just continue taking classes and kind of continue your educational journey, which is obviously the path that I ended up doing. But I do think for my personal self, I would have enjoyed having some time and space to make sure that I really was like ready to go for the PhD, so that I could like have a little more excitement at the end and be like, okay, let's finish it. But which will happen. We'll finish it. But then again, I also enjoyed the fact that I got to start right away and continue on my educational journey like straight through from undergrad. So pros and cons to both.
Yeah, I actually did 6 months in the same lab that I was doing undergrad research in. I stayed for an additional 6 months. Basically, I graduated in December, and then most programs start in September. So I do think that it was a great experience. I necessarily, the only thing I feel like I regret not doing earlier was find out about funding opportunities. I didn't, I originally was set on going to industry, and doing graduate research kind of came at a later point in my life, and the timing just didn't work out. But, if you apply for something like the Graduate Research Fellowship Program at NSF, and you end up getting that funding, that gives you a lot more freedom. Basically, there's a lot of professors that generally are limited by funding, and then if you can fund yourself for those first 3 years, that actually gives you more options. Yeah, it's something definitely worth for every single one of you to apply for.
And you have one of those, Chris, right? So you can maybe say, like, what's the application like?
Yeah, so I applied. You have the opportunity to apply either when you're an undergrad or in your first year. I believe that's the only two options right now. And I applied during my first year. The statement of purpose is about 3 pages long, and you also have to write your own research plan, which is 2 pages long. In my case, it was, at least, I guess it depends on whether you already have a lot of research experience or not. But in my case, my research advisor was very involved, and he helped me a lot in writing at least that section. You know, it mainly depends on you. I know they have different criteria. The reviewing committee is not going to expect the same from a first year PhD student as they're going to expect from a undergraduate. But it was definitely, at least for me, writing down my research plan really made me think about what I want to do during my PhD. So I took kind of that time to formulate a plan, which had not really been formulated in paper yet. So it was a great experience.
Anybody
Another
else want to
quick
share?
thing about the
Sorry.
another quick thing about the GRFP. I also applied, and I reused so much of that material for like other abstracts or other smaller grants I applied for. It was like a great writing exercise into like, all right, now you're a grad student, this is how you have to write. Like it's a different level of writing, and so that was like a good introduction to it. It was also like a really great way to do like background research, and so I got a lot more familiar like with my field and my lab's work as well.
Yeah, to add on to that, I know at least here, we had, I went to multiple workshops, and we do have a really good support program for people that are writing the NSF GRFP application. So just use the resources that you have available for you.
Yeah, about that, well, I'm from an international student, so it's a bit different for me. but I did took like 2 gap years. I mean, I worked in research, but that kind of helped me I really think why I want to do a PhD, and also to explore like all my options. I also have a scholarship, and I think that opens me like a lot of opportunities. I think that my options on graduate school would have been like very different if I haven't had that scholarship. So sometimes I wish I start right away, but I think it's I mean it pay off, like the gap year, like to prepare better. Yeah.
Grass is always greener. Grass is always greener.
So I think I see a couple of questions that are in the chat that Tim has responded to. Maybe I'll just field one of them to you guys. Do you guys know of any resources that are available to you when you're looking for jobs after PhD or options after PhD?
There's a lot of like other sort of auxiliary groups you can join if you sort of know what you're interested in. For example, I am somewhat considering consulting. And so there are like consulting groups and other resources, like if you know that's what you're interested in. There's also like workshops and groups for like people who know they're interested in academia. So like if you can narrow it down to sort of like a general thing, there are sort of subgroups that can really help you prepare for that job and apply for that job.
Yeah, and I think I do really recommend when people are in the PhD program to just actually read the emails that are sent out for like the COE announcements and things like that, because there are actually a lot of opportunities through the College of Engineering. For instance, I was able to, I think probably my 3 main professional development things I've done here. I went to Next Prof Nexus, which is people who are interested in faculty, and it's a really deep dive into what it's like to apply for a faculty position. They really walk you through like how to write a research statement, how do you interview, like very detailed type questions are handled within that workshop. So that was really helpful for me. It was like a 3-day weekend thing, really, really helpful. I went with Elizabeth actually to the Neurotech Entrepreneurship workshop, another like weekend 3-day thing where they had a lot of speakers from the neurotechnology field more generally, talk about ranging from venture capital to startups to, you know, med technology that's housed within an academic environment, all these different types of entrepreneurship ways to go about post PhD. So that was also really helpful. And then there's also like communication courses and lots of help with learning how to use LinkedIn and how to reach out to people. So I think there are like a ton of resources for figuring out next steps. And then also, as Elizabeth mentioned, you could do consulting. There's like student consulting groups on campus. You can kind of like get feelers for things while you're still a student in ways that, you know, don't take away time from research, that are just kind of like in addition to your regular research life. That I definitely recommend people look out for, especially, you know, from an early stage on, because it's easy to get overwhelmed with emails and not really look, but there's a lot of good stuff hidden in there. And there are a lot of resources, almost all of whom are free for students. Like you just go on these trips that they're paid for, you just show up. So it's definitely something to take advantage of.
To jump on that, yeah, like Lisa said, there are a lot of professional development opportunities here. You can join like a lot of different organizations, or you can even just participate in like short kind of like workshop type of events. So just to like give an example or a couple of examples of what's available. So one thing that I want to do like after I'm done is like continue to kind of like really put out like practical applications out there. So and like having solutions, kind of like practical solutions available. So one of the opportunities I got to do was participate in this team where we essentially kind of helped some of the administrative people at UMich Medicine kind of keep better track of the health records, because that was a major problem So we essentially developed the dashboard. That was really cool. Another thing was I got to participate in this entrepreneurship type of course. And through that course, I got to make a lot of connections with people in the industry. So there's a ton of these opportunities available. Like, you know, if you join the BME department here, Maria will constantly send you emails about those things. And they're all super like, for the most part, yeah, actually, I think all of them, or at least one I've participated in, they're like free of charge for students and just, you know, and then like my PI was always very supportive of these professional development opportunities. So yeah, lots of professional development opportunities here for sure.
Yeah, and I think another advantageous part of at least the BME master's curriculum is that you have some electives, and you know, you can use those electives to really explore your interests. I know it's been mentioned before, but a lot of people take advantage of those opportunities and join classes in the entrepreneurship department. I'm currently in one for consulting, and I've definitely enjoyed that experience so far. And I will type out what the name of the website is, but there's a website where you can figure out all the clubs that are on campus. So you can pretty much find anything, any kind of club for whatever experience you're looking for or interest you have. And that's just a great resource to be aware of.
And on like a small note, like once you're here, just like ask the grad students, even if they don't know, they'll probably know someone who knows, like, oh yeah, that person went into this job. How did they, you know what I mean? Like we can like reach out to the alumni that we know, even though they're gone, and like answer those questions for you.
All right, so there's one other question that I see in here. It looks like Tim just responded to it about asking faculty about reaching out to them and to talk about their lab. But so before maybe answering that, is there any other questions for the students here that we'd like to ask them?
There was a question about like our
favorite part of living in Ann Arbor.
Oh wait, Elizabeth, which one were you talking about?
There was a question earlier in the chat that was like, what's a typical week?
Oh yeah.
We probably didn't pounce on that one because we don't know how to answer it.
Yeah, that's
Is there a typical week?
No.
No.
I guess the first 2 years you do a lot of classes, so that provides some of the structure, and then you try to be in lab when you can, but it really depends on like what your lab is like, what you're like, and what your research is like.
Yeah.
But I would say like generally you put in, you know, at least at the beginning, you put in a fair amount of time, like just learning things, like you're kind of following people around, like assisting with experiments. At least that's how it is in the experimental lab. It's going to be very different if you're doing computational stuff, but experimentally, you know, I did a lot of just like shadowing people, learning techniques. And you know, that took up maybe half my time. And then the other half was classes and then like, you know, joining clubs or things like that. And then now, you know, after the quals, after your qualifying exam, which happens within your second year, so usually in the summer after you finish your classes, after your second year, then things are refocused mostly on research. There's an occasional class that you have to take, but you typically are just doing research. And so, you know, like my day now, I get up, I usually do some writing, I do some data analysis. Right now we're on shift schedule, so I go into the lab at 2 on days that I have to go in. And then, you know, sometimes I used to do a lot more weekend stuff due to how the experiments worked. Now I, you know, kind of come in on the occasional weekend and usually just for a couple hours in the afternoon, prepping for things. And then my focus right now is doing a lot of these like lawn surgeries with the Bruns lab. So you know, so then I'll have like a big concentrated lab time where there's a lot of time, there's a lot of prep right before, and then, you know, it'll be a few days where I don't go into lab right after. So that's how my like day-to-day life looks like. I have a fair amount of consistency, except for the times when I have these big experimental pushes. And yeah, it definitely changes as you go through. The beginning is a lot of classes and you kind of stick in lab when you can, and then that shifts once you are finished with your heavy course load and you're just doing research. but it does look different for everybody. So it is a tough question to answer.
There's a question here about advice if you aren't completely sure of what type of research you want to pursue. I think someone who's done rotations probably should be able to answer that best. I have not done rotations, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah, I can chime in for that question a little bit. So I don't know if like my situation was very similar to whoever asked the question, but for me, I suppose there were certain factors that I was still considering when like after I decided to come here. So one of those was like ideally I would have wanted to do both computational and experimental work as a graduate student. So as I was doing the rotations here, I got to rotate with 2 labs, but I also got to talk to other faculty as well. But yeah, I was just kind of like gauging, kind of like, you know, not just the research that they do, but kind of like what kind of exact work that they do, and if they have opportunities for both computational and experimental work. And I just knew that I did want a major part of my research to be computational application or computational research. I would say the rotation that they provide here is very nice. I did get to really consider those factors. And in the end, I got to choose a lab that I do enjoy doing research in. Although I would say it did feel like a little short. I don't think I could have rotated with more than 2 labs here. So if you're someone that, you know, like you feel like you might need a lot of time to really decide kind of what research you want to do, I think other institutions or programs have longer rotation, kind of like longer, like year-long rotations available. So that like could be something that you also consider when you're applying to graduate schools. So I guess long story short is the rotation here did provide me with an opportunity to gauge kind of exactly what kind of research and what kind of lab I wanted to join, but it did feel a little short because we had to make a decision by November. So
I will add to that. When I was interviewing with Tim and stuff, I kind of like hinted that I would like to come early to join the lab and see if there was a space. So I know a lot of professors are open to that. I know another student in our lab came early to rotate and rotated. I know another student like informally rotated over the summer. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. If you know there's like a lot of labs you're interested in, you can try and set that up yourself outside of the formal rotation process, and most professors are eager to help make that happen.
Yeah, I know. I actually came in a month earlier, and I do think it was a good experience because at that time my professor didn't really have to deal with, you know, both being a mentor to students and also teach classes because it will be in the middle of the summer, and he was more, you know, more available in general. And for rotations, I've had, for example, my roommate, he did rotations, and I know the main thing to consider is that here at the University of Michigan, we're full of great faculty, and even if at some point you don't believe that, you know, this might interest you, doing rotations, you'll be surprised and end up in that lab, which has happened to at least one friend of mine.
I think it's good to explore for sure. I mean, even just having the discussions with the faculty members, because you know, they're all doing, everybody in the department is doing really interesting work, even if it's not, you know, in the area that you're going to end up in. Just getting to know what they're doing and understanding that is really valuable because there's so much expertise around. You just get the exposure. So I think the last question that I see on here, unless anybody else sees a question that they would like to address, is what the favorite part of living in Ann Arbor is. It's a good question to end on if that's the last question.
I think I really like how Ann Arbor is big enough to be continually exciting, but small enough that I feel like I really know the place, which I think is like a great combo. I have lots of like favorite spots and shops, and I mean, pre-pandemic, and favorite activities to do, but also like there's always new stuff. There's always new stuff to do, and there's new shops or like cafes or restaurants that will open up. But it's also like, if I need to bike across town, it's like 15 minutes. Like it's really easy to get places. It's easy to get around, and I think that's just like a really nice combination to have, where it feels homey, but it's also like big enough that there's new and exciting things to do, and there's parts of town I haven't explored yet, and I like that combination.
It's also pretty well situated with regards to being next to like a large city. Like I've been into Detroit a few times for like baseball games. I've like checked out the casino, and then Chicago is only like a 4-hour train ride away. I've been known to spend a long weekend there as well. So if you really want the big city vibe, like it's not that hard to get. And yeah, like, if you feel like a big change of pace, there's all these like secret, like sort of not like hidden spots, but they're like a drive, I guess. So your typical like undergraduate crowd won't be there. A lot of hidden gems like the apple cider mill, stuff like that. That any grad student could probably tell you their favorite hidden spots.
For me, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. For me, it was I think one of my there's I guess two main things. One is there's kind of a you can get both like kind of like a quiet environment, and you can get kind of like a lively environment. Like if I want to, well, I guess during pre-pandemic times, if I want to like be around more like a crowd, then I can just go to downtown, or I can go to like sports events, and like it's really lively. But if I just want a quiet night, and I can just kind of like stay in my apartment up in North Campus, and it's just like a really nice kind of like also the air is very fresh because it's it's not a heavy heavy urban area, so you can also get that nice kind of like quiet kind of like nature type of environment as well. And the second thing is that well, I didn't know this coming in here, but I found out there's a lot of things to do outdoors here, and I really like doing things outdoors, especially things in water. And well, I think I don't know how many lakes, but there's a lot of lakes. Unfortunately, I didn't get to explore a lot of that yet because I was going to do things this summer, but the pandemic didn't let me. I couldn't do it because of the pandemic. But yeah, there's a lot of outdoor things to do here as well. So that's another part. That's my favorite about Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I would say my favorite part. I agree with what Carolina said, that it depends on you whether you want like something more secluded, and then you can be next to your lab if you live closer in North Campus, or if you want to live in Central or downtown, then you could also do that. For me, I right now live in downtown, and what I like is that it's super walkable. So I could literally go anywhere and just walk or ride my bike. And I always feel safe in Ann Arbor doing so. So during the pandemic, my car is just there accumulating dust, basically, because I just walk or ride my bike everywhere, which I really enjoyed. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, just for like, people considering living situations, I'm like a 10-minute drive from campus, 15-minute drive from the building I work in. And we have my boyfriend and I have a 2-bedroom apartment with like a basement and a big front yard. So like if you're the kind of person who likes a lot of space, if you just are willing to venture a little outside of the main downtown, you can find pretty big apartments as well if you need room for hobbies and such.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we are good on time, so maybe we should end it there. Thanks to you guys, the graduate students, for sharing your opinions and your time with the prospective students, and thanks to everybody. I know that we've had a few people dropping out over the last kind of 5-10 minutes, but thanks to everybody for attending today. And Tim, did you want to say anything to close us off?
Thanks for those who were here earlier and those who stuck it out to the end. Certainly, you're welcome to contact us for information. Our direct email addresses are on the website for some of the faculty. I know there's great questions just posted in the chat as well for individuals. If any of the students want to put their email address on there as well, in the chat, I'll type mine in also if you have direct questions. We may be posting this video online, so I know David set it up to record this. There's at least one person who left early, so we'll try to might see about putting it on our department website. But if you have more questions or answers, please let us know. We look forward to seeing you or seeing your applications if you're interested. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Good luck, guys.
Bye.